Tony, you are an active investor and entrepreneur with more than 30 years history of founding companies and designing products that profoundly improve people's life. So what are some of the biggest and most difficult problems you're trying to solve now?
Now, there's three general categories. One is helping the planet and getting, helping find solutions to the climate crisis we have. Strengthening societies. So, when we work together and we, I guess, break the boundaries of these, these incumbents that might have control structures in the value chain for the last 100 years or 50 years, breaking those chains in some way and bringing the power that those gatekeepers had to the individuals. We like to do that. And then the third one's really personal health and how do we improve health on the planet. So those are the three main categories. Now, we don't solve any of them ourselves. What we call ourselves Mentors with Money. And we work with all these incredibly brilliant entrepreneurs around the planet and help them and use the reason for Build was I get the same questions over and over. So I put them in a book so I could give them to all the people we invest in so I don't have to tell the same stories over and over. So that's why, so that I could get into deeper stories as opposed to just the top line stories that are in the book. So yeah, so it's really fun and it's really rewarding working on those three areas with all of these entrepreneurs and being able to help.
Could you give us maybe some examples of each category?
Sure. Let's see. In the climate. So this kind of goes into health and it is climate. So Impossible Foods. I'm assuming you know what Impossible Foods is. We were one of the first checks in Impossible Foods and first investors in Impossible Foods. And so that was before it was everybody was talking about plant-based meats and alternative meats and, the methane that's produced by cows and all the land use issues and all that stuff, food use even. So that was something we did. And so it's slightly better for your health and a lot better for the planet. That's one thing we did. And obviously it's successful. On the health side, specifically, we have many different companies, but we have one company called Prenuvo, Prenuvo. And what that is a full body scanner. And that body scanner in 50 minutes will give you a full inside analysis through MRI of your body. It's very Star Trek-like. You lay down and 50 minutes later, you see everything on the insides and you can get all these indications. And so that's really a huge wave of preventative care as well as diagnostic care that is coming and will be everywhere over the next 5 to 10 years, helping health, helping societies. So when I say that, we try to bring financial and technological means to the society and the small and medium-sized farmers. So agriculture and aquaculture. So in aquaculture specifically, we have a company called Expertseed. And what they do is they provide the technology to shrimp and shellfish farmers to make sure they have the healthiest, best crops, the most valuable crops, but they're also not hurting the environment. So they do that, and they bring the financing to people who all they have is a little plot of land and, maybe that's even rented and a smartphone, right? And all of a sudden they have the tools these big agricultural, companies have to help them with their crop monitoring, with their feed supplies, with getting to market, all with just a smartphone and their little crop. And so that's really rewarding because now we're all throughout Ecuador. We have other companies doing it in Southeast Asia. And now these tools are giving these people superpowers, these farmers superpowers, and they're producing better crops and they're aligned with the right mission for the planet too.
Yeah. Wow. So those are very tangible examples and the things that you're working on and in a very big problem areas that everybody is trying to do something about it. So that's wonderful. And I cannot imagine, the 200 startups that you're advising and mentoring and how would that impact be? So you're,
I hope it's going to be huge. That's the whole goal, is to give back, and do it at scale and get all of these brilliant brains around the world, not just building their businesses and doing good, but inspiring other builders in their areas, right? Because everyone was like, back in the day, it's like, you have to come to Silicon Valley. It's the only place to build. No, that's not the case anymore, as you know. Like, you can do that all around the world. So it's really great to not just have these businesses solve local problems or new industrial problems, but also to inspire and get the next generation of builders around them going, so that it lights a fire, so to speak, and it just keeps it keeps growing over time. So we get all these brilliant brains around the world working on solutions to help our society, our planet, our individual families.
So the phenomenon you just described, that innovation is happening all around the world, do you think the pandemic actually helped to accelerate that pace?
Oh, absolutely. The reason being was investors were forced to invest in companies they may never even went to their offices, right? A lot of people, because of the pandemic, they were investing money. They always said, you need to come to us. You need to do this. Video conferencing or teleconferencing isn't good enough, blah, 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 blah. Well, for their business, they had to reinvent themselves, thank God, because they weren't changing fast enough. And now all of a sudden they are much less gun shy to invest in things outside of their locale, right? Somebody who's just nearby. And so that's great. The other thing that happened was the tools and the technologies became even more widespread and easier to use, as well as more democratized. In other words, more open source was happening. More things were being developed in different places. Virtual teams were being formed with people all around the world, so that you didn't just, again, have to have everybody under one roof, and only the talent you could get in your town was the talent that you're going to be able to use. You can now, and experts know that they're like, yeah, they spend half their day virtually, maybe, talking to teams or individuals. And this is a great way to work and communicate. So, there's a silver lining in every tragedy. And I think that was one of them, it really unlocked a lot of anachronisms, and idiosyncrasies from the past, or now, those things have been proven and shot down. And it's okay to, and it's productive, actually, to be able to work in this format. Not always, but to add this to our palette of ways of working together.
Yeah, I am actually very interested in terms of your vision and opinion when it comes to company culture, because of this remote environment, right? Where we come from, both Apple and Google, even the Nest that you founded, has a very, very strong culture and built because the people working together, right? Even you talk about this barbecue, kind of once a week, right? At Nest, and Google obviously has whole other, perk and other things that to nurture the culture side. And Apple has a very, very strong, distinctive culture.
Right.
And therefore, I contribute a lot, I feel like, is because of the successful culture, build a successful company. But what about the future? Given this environment, it's very different now.
Well, what I'm about to say, it works for atoms only companies, atoms and bits companies, or bits only companies. So, there might be a little bit more in one way or another, but look, hybrid is the way to do everything. It's not all virtual and not all physical, but hybrid of a combination of the two, regardless of what you're building, is incredibly important, because every scheduled Zoom teleconference is great, but it's only to do something. You're there for a purpose. There is no, how can I say, interesting collisions when people just, are in a break room, or they're on lunch together, or driving to and from work together, or something, where certain conversations and connections are made, more so than just doing work on a screen, right? Or doing work in a meeting, right? Yeah. Usually the most successful parts of the meeting are the beginning of the meeting and the end of the meeting, when everybody's talking informally with each other and going, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. Oh, we should talk about that afterwards, and blah, 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 right? Or let's get together for lunch and talk about this thing more. So, and you don't really have that with
Mhm.
these Zoom things. The other thing is for the for the individual, when you've worked in a culture that you really love, there is a FOMO, or a fear of missing out, when you're not in the office. So if you're in a hybrid situation where it's 3 days and 2 days out or whatever, and that culture exists during those 3 days in physically, together, people will be like, I have to go into work because it's so much fun, or I want to connect. It's not just about, Elon Musk over at, SpaceX and Tesla. He's like, you must come back to work or else.
Mm.
I don't think that's the right way to approach it. I think about the human nature and what had changed with the pandemic. What happened with the pandemic is people who were trapped in their cages got out of their cages, or their hamster wheel, or whatever it was. They got out of it. They didn't like their job in the first place, or they didn't like it. And so they found a new way of being. And now people are telling them, you must come back and get in that cage. It's like telling your kids, you must go to bed now. Very different than reading them a story and saying that, that's a different thing. It's a different way to go to bed, right? Because you're making it fun. You're making it interesting. There's a reason for it, not just a direction. I think more companies have to think about it that way, not just about the culture they want to see, but the culture that truly exists, because maybe the people don't want to come back to work because they think work sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something tells me they need to fix something about the way they do things and what they do each day. Because if it was, as you were saying, there wasn't a day I didn't want to go into Nest, if you know what I mean, or into Apple, because it was so rewarding to work with all these people. Now, you don't have to go 5 days a week, but there's got to be some selected number of days where everyone can get together and have that magical thing happen, right? And we just have to remember, we're putting people back in boxes or in cages or in hamster wheels, and they have to be enticed, not forced.
Yeah. So in another word, that actually the way how you describe it is an opportunity that to strike a balance, right? Hybrid actually gave us a balance in terms of, how much time you want to stay in the office versus how much time you want it to be just free, right? And free.
Well, you're going to do your work, but you're not going to have, certain schedule constraints in the mornings or evenings or whatever it is. But I think that the big thing here is, yes, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look at your culture and also build it, maybe build it differently. But you have to remember that if your meetings really sucked when you were physically together, why are they going to all of a sudden get better when they were virtual or physical again? So what were those things that people really don't like doing?
Yeah.
Or some people just don't really care about the mission, and then they shouldn't be at that company anymore. So sometimes it's about the culture or the company. Sometimes it's what they're building, and sometimes it's the individual. And you have to tear those apart to really understand, because it's too easy to go, I don't want to go back to work anymore. Well, why don't you want to go back to work? Be very specific so we can fix those things at work. Do you see what I mean? As opposed to, I'm really not working. I just have my feet up at home and I check in with a thing, but I'm really not working. Well, then that's a different story. I think we have too much of this general press just saying, oh, people don't want to go back to work. I think there's a lot of different motivations behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I also want to pivot. You cannot avoid talking to Tony about, right, technology. So you are the principal at a Future Shape, an investment and advisory firm coaching deep tech startups. Currently, Future Shape is coaching more than 200 startups that are innovating game-changing technologies. So Tony, is there some promising, exciting technology that you have invested in or are watching for you're waiting to share with us?
Well, there's a lot of companies that are doing really interesting things. A lot of stuff from, new types of materials, new types of energy storage, better batteries, like I said, better health. There's so many cool things out there. And so we only invest in things that we care about and we're curious about because we have that luxury. So usually if you look at the 200 companies, usually maybe it's 198 that are really interesting. There's one company I'm working on now that I can't really talk about, but solves a real problem for us, well, with a big trash problem that we have in the planet. So I'm looking forward to talking about that in the quarters to come. But it's really tremendous. What are other things that, Menlo Micro, actually Menlo Micro, which is right there in Irvine, which is right near you guys. They're having the transistor moment for relays. So relays, relays, they open and close electromagnetically, most of them. Well, the relay hasn't really been innovated in 150 years since it was first invented. Well, this company in Irvine, Menlo Micro, has reinvented the relay. And it brought the transistor moment to the relay. And if you think of everything going electrical and everything going wireless, we need to worry about the extreme efficiencies of transmitting those signals or that power. Menlo Micro does that with this switch. And so to give you just an idea of how powerful this tiny little thing is, it's 1,000 times better in every dimension. In India, 6 to 8% of all electricity is consumed by ceiling fans in homes. 6 to 8%. If you take this one switch and you add it into the controller of the fan, you don't change the fan, but just the controller, that 6 to 8% of the total electrical consumption of India goes down to 3 or 4%.
So by
just one switch. Just think about that. How many things because 60% of all energy produced on this planet is wasted today. 60% of all energy produced is just thrown away.
Yeah.
Think about all the places where we can go after that waste and literally clean up so many things without changing very much, right? That's the stuff for me that is really cool. And, like you said, what's an innovative company? I think, it's very geeky, but it's incredibly important and it's fundamental to everything we're going to do in the future, especially as we rebuild the infrastructure around us, whether that's the electrical grid or all the transportation, all electrical transportation, all the next generation wireless networks, all of these things need these kinds of things in them. And so that's what's so beautiful is that, when you find those things that really matter, they can change everything very quickly, just like the smartphone did, just like the iPod did,
Yeah. So provided with the problem that you mentioned, right, the 3 categories, and also some technological trend that you observed, do you suggest any new skills for either the students in the school or actually young professionals who already graduated? Like, what are some of the things that they should be watching out and equip them with?
Well, I think in all cases, every single, employee or leader in a firm or anything, it's important to understand climate and understand what happens to the things we build after we build them, not just in the usage, but at the end of life. That includes something in the bits, bits only, like it doesn't have to just be atoms. And I think it's as important as reading or writing or doing math. You need to understand enough of this so that you factor it into the designs and the things that you're making or in the companies that you work for to ask the questions to say, how can we change? How do we change to be greener? Because usually if you're greener, it's usually better economically for the business too. It's better for the planet, it's better for the business, and it's better for our individual health, right? And the planet's health. So the more you ask questions around that stuff and you get involved, the more likely change will happen, right? But if everyone just thinks it's like, oh, that's the environmental group, they take care of it. This is, the way I say it is, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And if you're apathetic or indifferent to the climate change, you're part of the problem. Yeah. To be part of the solution, you need to be doing things professionally and personally at home to figure out how to change your consumption, to figure out how to buy better, how to implement the things that you're implementing better or differently at your professional, position or what have you, so that that we're all working together. Because people are complaining, I don't want to be at work 5 days a week. Well, all of a sudden people are changing and saying it's got to be hybrid and there's different stuff. Well, if that same workforce was also saying we must fix this in our company, not just we have to be green, but we have to fix these 3 things at our company because these are really bad, because they know the details and they rise up and all the employees say that, guess what? Change will happen. Even if the leaders don't want it to, the change will happen sooner or later. So it's incumbent on everyone to be part of the solution. And even if they're not leading, to be asking the questions and getting informed on not just the problems, but the potential solutions, or ask the questions in a way to find potential solutions.
Yeah. I love how you say it. It almost sounds to me that everybody needs to be more mindful and being thoughtful in terms of circle of life, whatever you are doing, right? Whether you're consuming them, whether producing them, designing them, thinking about, that more of breadth and depth of the circle of life, that what's the impact.
And it's hard. A lot of times it's hard when you're single, before you have a family, right? Before you have a family, to really think beyond yourself and your own needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, what really changed, and I always cared, I cared about nature and things, but not to the level I do today. It was until I had my first kid, right?
Yeah.
And then you start going, wait a second, what are we doing here? So I encourage the audience, the students out there, to not wait till they have kids or think about that kind of stuff, future generation. Think about it from the opportunities for your career, both professionally, economically, financially, to go into these spaces that need lots of brilliant brains, because we're going to have a massive set of hiring, or we already are, in all of these industries around that stuff that need to change. Don't just go where the change is occurring, go where the change will occur, where you can go to a certain business and bring technology in to help them do things better, because they're going to need you. And so just don't wait to take up the climate cause because it was something our parents did or our grandparents did. It's also an opportunity for you to actually make a real big mark and actually help you and your future family, if that's what you choose, in a big way when you're young. You don't have to wait till you're older.
Yeah, I can tell you that the future generation cares a lot about it. And I would love to bring you one day to the classroom and to hear that what they're worried about, what they wanted to work on. I'm very optimistic when it comes to the future generations, especially the one that, in our school. And it just seems like a very different mindset compared to, who I am when I was at their age.
I'm with you, because the entrepreneurs that I'm working with, a lot of them aren't married, they don't have families or what have you. And the passion that they have for, health or society or the environment, these kinds of things. People always ask me, what do you think about the future? Because everybody thinks it's so dark and horrible and, we don't have anything, because all they hear about is negativity. When you work with all of these brilliant brains and you see what they're working on and what they're manifesting in the world and their enthusiasm and the mission they're on, there's no way you can't be hopeful. You have to be hopeful when you see like, oh my God, they're working on these things and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time and a matter of will in the governments and some of our, our powers that be to change. But when there's this massive groundswell and solutions, not just complaints, but solutions, that's when it's like, unavoidable. You have to take note. And it just brings so much hope. I'm so optimistic. And that's why I love doing what I do, because I get to see 10, 15 years in the future and see that we really do have solutions to many of the problems we have. We still have more things to do, but there's so much opportunity. This is, to me, I think of this as what happened in the Industrial Revolution between like 1880 and the 1930s and 40s. Mm-hmm. But that really happened in just a few cities around the planet. We're going through that same transformation in every city in the world at the same time, or nearly the same time. That means there is so much opportunity in so many companies and so many things that need to be built to fix and undo all the things. It's not going to be the incumbents who are going to fix it. It's going to be all these new companies, right? General Motors, Ford, all these other companies, they started back then and they became huge because they rode that wave and they did it right. What are the companies now that are going to be created that are going to be those Fortune 500 companies, you know, over the next 30 years? There's so many more companies that need to be created, because if you look at many of the companies on the Fortune 500 or 5,000 list, many of those will not exist in the next 30 years. So who's going to replace them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, well, this is awesome. I love this conversation because I can feel the energy, the optimism. Beautiful.